You are lying inside a shallow volcanic rock shelter in Kubifora, Kenya, precisely 1.7 million years ago. The time is exactly 2:15 a.m. The savanna night is completely dark, and a suffocating, feverish heat radiates outward from your own skin. You have no aspirin, no synthetic antibiotics, and no clean running water to wash your face. You have only a rough stone hand axe resting near your hand. Through the pitch blackness, you feel a deep, agonizing, throbbing ache radiating inside the marrow of your femur bones, making it completely impossible to lift your legs or crawl towards the entrance. You are trapped inside your own failing muscles. There is absolutely no escape route from the invisible killer tearing apart your cells, and your fever-dreaming brain is currently doing something completely useless. It is obsessively trying to replicate the exact chirping pattern of a cicada you heard 3 days ago. This excruciating moment of physical collapse did not just happen to you on this single night. This biological ambush repeated itself across every river basin and forest clearing for more than 2 million consecutive years during the dawn of our genus, Homo. Physically, our early ancestors were highly vulnerable. We lacked thick fur shields. We possessed no biological resistance to microscopic invaders, and our open wounds from hunts were perfect entry points for pathogens. Yet, these early hominins managed to survive the invisible onslaught, push through catastrophic outbreaks, and successfully pass their genetic blueprints down to us. How did they fight an enemy they could not see or understand? By the end of this journey, you will feel a chilling realization of how close our species came to being completely wiped out by our very first microscopic rival. When people hear about the first major diseases among early humans, their minds immediately jump to the bubonic plague, the devastating smallpox outbreaks of history, or a dramatic influenza pandemic sweeping through a crowded prehistoric village. No, stop. Absolutely not. When Homo erectus first began to master the landscape, crowded cities did not exist, and respiratory viruses had no way to jump between small, isolated bands. The true, original nightmare of our ancestors was a silent, bone-devouring bacterial infection that came directly from the one thing they needed to survive: their food. This was brucellosis, the world's oldest documented zoonotic disease. The bacterial pathogen, Brucella, did not wait for humans to build civilizations. It was already weaponized within the bodies of prehistoric antelope, ancient cattle, and megafauna. When early humans began to actively scavenge and hunt, they came into direct contact with infected raw blood and unpasteurized tissues. Once the bacteria slipped through a microscopic cut in an early human's hand, it began a slow, systematic invasion of the skeletal system. The infection caused intermittent, undulant fevers that peaked at a dangerous 40.5 degrees Celsius every single evening, systematically destroying the host's physical stamina. Here is the thing that made this disease a total existential threat. It did not kill its host immediately, but rather turned active, strong hunters into completely paralyzed dependents who could no longer walk or forage for the group. But this internal devastation was only the baseline of the problem, because a paralyzed hunter meant a severe drop in the clan's daily caloric intake. This is the exact point where everything changes for our species. In the animal kingdom, when an individual becomes permanently crippled by a pathogen, the pack leaves them behind to ensure the collective survival of the group. However, early humans chose a completely different evolutionary path. To fight the debilitating effects of brucellosis, Homo erectus bands developed a highly sophisticated system of long-term social care. Clan members would intentionally stay behind in camp to protect the infected individual, carry water over long distances to break their fevers, and pre-chew tough meat for those whose teeth were loosened by systemic infection. What is truly interesting about this behavior is that our earliest medical intervention was not a physical tool or a magical plant. It was the simple, revolutionary act of human empathy and shared labor. However, simply nursing the sick was a defensive strategy. It did not stop the bacteria from entering the camp in the first place. Think about this. You can care for the sick as much as you want, but if you keep eating infected raw meat, your entire population will eventually collapse. Chronological data from archaeological layers suggests that the widespread control of fire, occurring roughly 1 million to 400,000 years ago, was the ultimate technological turning point in our war against microbes. Early humans began to realize that meat exposed to high heat did not cause the terrible bone fevers that raw meat did. The application of thermal energy to animal flesh effectively pasteurized the food supply, killing off nearly 100% of the Brucella bacteria before it could bypass the human stomach lining. And then, fire transformed from a simple tool for warmth into the first systemic public health barrier in human history. The real evolutionary breakthrough was not just the physical use of fire, but the cognitive ability to screen prey before the hunt even began. Early humans began to notice patterns in the animals they tracked across the savanna. They observed that animals infected with brucellosis often suffered from swollen joints, moved up to 30% slower than the rest of the herd, and had spontaneous miscarriages. Instead of targeting these easily caught, sickly individuals, our ancestors developed the strategic foresight to avoid them entirely, recognizing that a seemingly easy meal carried an invisible curse. This realization sparked a massive shift in hunting behavior. Early humans began targeting healthy, fast-moving prime-age adults, prioritizing long-term biological safety over an easy, short-term caloric payoff. But this grim tactical battle against our first disease is not just a speculative theory constructed by modern scientists. This ancient war is verified by concrete, paleopathologic evidence preserved directly inside the fossilized matrix of our ancestors' bones. Scientists conducting a detailed osteological analysis on a famous Australopithecus africanus skeleton discovered in South Africa, dating back over 2 million years, found something truly undeniable. The lumbar vertebrae showed highly specific destructive lesions and eroded bone surfaces that are perfectly identical to the modern damage caused by brucellosis. Furthermore, the famous 1.7 million-year-old Homo erectus specimen, known as KNMER 1808, shows massive abnormal bone growths caused by severe hypervitaminosis A or systemic infection, accompanied by clear signs that she survived for weeks while completely incapacitated. This concrete physical proof shows that our ancestors were fighting, surviving, and caring for victims of complex systemic diseases before they even possessed the language to describe them. And then, this is the part that changes the entire trajectory of life on Earth. When we look closely at the mechanics of our early struggle with pathogens, we realize that the introduction of disease was not a purely negative disaster that held our species back. Instead, the invisible attack of these ancient bacteria acted as the ultimate evolutionary accelerator. The pathogens did not just destroy our tissues, they forced our immune systems to diversify, pressured our brains to develop complex food processing strategies, and fundamentally forged the cooperative, empathetic social structures that define humanity today. There is still a lively academic debate regarding whether brucellosis or ancient dental infections caused the highest mortality rate among early hominins. However, the overarching pattern is clear. We did not become human despite these horrific diseases. We became human because we had to adapt to survive them. Our earliest ancestors did not defeat the first planetary diseases through modern chemistry or genetic engineering, but through the primal strength of collective care, the controlled power of fire, and the strategic intelligence to read the invisible warnings of nature. The next time you are standing in your modern kitchen, casually washing your hands with antibacterial soap or waiting for your food to cook thoroughly on a stove, remember that simple routine. Remember that 1.7 million years ago, in the pitch-black darkness of the Kenyan savanna at 2:15 a.m., an early human lay on the cold stone floor, shivering with a bone-devouring fever, but protected by the watchful eyes of their clan. They endured the agonizing heat of our very first biological war so that the line could move forward, eventually reaching you. You carry the immune system of a survivor.